In the last video, you learned about the regular arrow function syntax as well as its shorthand syntax companion. In this one, we're going to talk about some of the more subtle differences between arrow functions and regular functions, because there are some that are important to note. To do this, we're going to leave this file exactly as it sits. We're just going to create a new one in the advanced directory, arrow-function2.js. And in here, we're going to start by creating a regular function, not an arrow function. Let's go ahead and do just this. We'll create a simple one like add, const add equals. We're going to set up a regular old function with the function keyword. And here we're just going to take two arguments. Let's name A and B. What I want to talk about here is a local variable that's actually bound to all of your regular functions. As we saw earlier in the course, with our methods, functions defined on objects, we can access the this local variable to get access to that object. Well, inside of all of our regular functions, we also have access to arguments. Arguments stores all of the arguments passed into the function, not necessarily just the ones that were actually named. So let's go ahead and explore this by calling add. And I'm going to call add with not one or two arguments, but with four. So let's go ahead and use 11, 22, 33, and 44. Now what we're going to do is access the argument's local variable inside of the function. That's console.log, and right here, arguments. Awesome. Now what we're going to do is take this file, save it, and run it to see what we get. Over in the terminal, we're going to run this file, node, arrow, function2.js, and when we run it, what do we get? We get all of the arguments passed in. Now you'll notice that we only named the first two, A and B, but all four are indeed showing up here. We have 11, we have 22, we have 33, and 44. Now we can actually create the add function, but instead of using these named arguments, we could just use the argument's local variable to access their values. So right here, I could set it up to return. We're going to access arguments, and we're going to grab the first one with an index of 0, and then we're going to add it on to the second one, arguments 1, and we'll ignore the third and fourth ones. So at this point, we are returning something, so we want to make sure to actually print it. Console.log. I got to add my closing parenthesis. Then we can save things and rerun it to see exactly what we get. Right here, what do we get? We get 33, the result of 11 plus 22. So arguments isn't particularly useful, but it does exist, and there are some situations where you do find yourself using it. I'd say that at about 99.99% of my functions, I do not use arguments. Now, it's important to note, arguments only exists in regular functions. It is not bound. There is no local variable in your arrow functions. So if we were to take the exact same function and just switch it over, we would see this code fail. Up above, we can go ahead and do just this. Let's remove the function keyword and add the arrow in between the arguments list and the function body. If I save the file and rerun things, what do we get? We do not get 33. Now you'll also notice that we don't get something like arguments is not defined. What we're seeing here, this strange output, this is node specific. If you're interested in learning more about Node, at the end of this course, I would recommend taking a Node course. I also have one, though you can take anyone's Node course, and you'll learn more about where this stuff's coming from. For now, all we need to know is that our local function doesn't bind arguments, which means we do not have access to 11, 22, 33, or 44. Now this is okay because, as I said, in most situations, and almost all, we do not use arguments, so we're not going to get any downside by converting over to arrow functions. For example, in all the code we've written in this course, we have been able to get by and create meaningful applications without using arguments once. The other difference between arrow functions and regular functions is that arrow functions don't bind their this value, meaning they're bad candidates for most methods. Down below, we can create an example that shows this off. Let's make a constant car, and this is going to be an object. For now, we'll just have a single property color. I'll set my color to red. I don't even have a car. I definitely don't have a red car. And then down below, we're going to go ahead and create a method that needs to access this. So let's go ahead and do something like get summary. We'll set up our function. Our arguments list, we don't need any arguments, and then we will set up the function body. All we're going to do is return. Right here, what are we going to return? The car is followed by its color. This dot color. Now we know this is going to work. We've seen this work plenty of times in the past. I'll use console.log to output what? Whatever comes back from calling car.getSummary, which is the string that we just set up. I'll save the file. Over in the terminal, we can rerun things, and I can see we are getting this is not defined. That's due to a small typo. Let's go ahead and clean that up. Now we'll rerun things for a second time, and the code should work. Right here, we get the car is red printing. This stuff being the output from our first example up above. So the car is red is indeed printing. We are able to access this. If I take this and switch it out from a regular function to an arrow function by removing the function keyword and adding in my arrow, we now still have a function, but the function is accessing values which it no longer has access to. This is not bound. So now we can rerun things with the arrow function in place and see what we get. Down below, what do we get? We get car is undefined. It is trying to access something that does not exist. So when we are creating methods, functions, on object properties, we want to stick with regular functions as opposed to arrow functions. They're bad candidates for a situation like that. Now there is still an alternative way to define your regular functions on an object. This is using the method definition syntax. And all we do to do that is we remove the function keyword and we remove the colon. And we set things up like this. We have our method name, our arguments list, and our function body. This is still a regular old function that does bind this. It's just an alternative syntax for setting up a method. So if we were to save things in this state, the program would be back to a working state. Right here, I run it and I get the car is red. So there we have it. Those are the main differences between regular functions and arrow functions. Arrow functions don't bind arguments. They don't bind this. And arrow functions come with that advanced shorthand syntax. Now it's time to sift through all of the code we've written in our Notes app and our To-Do app and convert it over to an arrow function if we can. We're going to go ahead and do a few of these together, and then you'll be doing the rest as your challenge. So I'm going to close down the two files that we've worked with in the last couple of videos, and I'm going to start with the Notes functions file. In here, we're going to go function by function, figuring out if it needs to be a regular function or not. So in general, I first write all of my functions as arrow functions. That's my personal preference. If I can convert it to the shorthand syntax, I do. Now, if I need a feature of a regular function, like accessing this or arguments, I will use the regular function syntax, but I default to the arrow function syntax. That means if I were to look at this function using what we now know, I would say, can this be an arrow function? Yes, it can. I'm not using this. I'm not using arguments. So let's go ahead and switch that up. Remove the function keyword and set up the arrow. Now, the second thing I'd ask myself is, can I use the shorthand syntax? In this case, no, I cannot. I'm doing much more than just returning a single value. Down below, we'll do a few more together and then I'll set you loose. Right here, this function, can I use an arrow function? Yes, I can. I'll remove the function keyword and add the arrow. Can I use the shorthand syntax? Well, I'm not returning anything, so I'm going to leave it as is. Let's do two more. Down below, we have remove note. Remove note does a few things, but it doesn't use this or arguments, so I can remove the function keyword, add in the arrow, and I'll leave this as a regular function, no shorthand syntax. The next one and the last one we're going to do together is a good candidate for not only an arrow function, but also the shorthand syntax. So step one, let's go ahead and get rid of that function keyword and add the arrow in. Now we can see this one is simple. We just return some sort of expression. We can take this, cut it out of the code, highlight our curly braces, and paste it in place. And what do we end up with? We end up with a single line for finding the notes index. Now, the important thing to do is to make sure our code still runs. So if I save notes functions, we can test things out. Here, get saved notes, save note, and remove note were all changed. Here I can see my notes are indeed printing. And if I delete a note, it is indeed going away. Refreshing it, Z is indeed deleted. permanently. So there we have it. We were able to convert a few functions on our own. What I want you to do is go through the other functions in this file, as well as the other 4 files we have. 2 more for notes and 2 more for to do. You're going to convert everything over to an arrow function if you can, and you're going to use the shorthand syntax for all of your arrow functions if possible, using the same rules we just used here. Take some time to knock that out and then test your work. Make sure both of the apps still function correctly. Take a moment to pause the video, and when you're done, click play. How'd you do? Hopefully you were able to get that done, and hopefully you were able to find some situations where you could use the shorthand syntax. I'm going to continue on with this file. The next function is a good candidate for an arrow function, so I will convert it. It's not a good candidate for the shorthand syntax. Down inside of here, we have another function. I can convert that to an arrow function, but once again, no shorthand. And then if we keep scrolling down, we have sort notes. We have a few great candidates for arrow functions inside of here, although none for the shorthand syntax. I'm going to convert all of these real quick. We got 2 more down below for our other sort calls. And finally, 1 for alphabetical. Excellent. Now that we have all of those converted, we're just going to keep moving down the file. We have render notes down here. Render notes itself can be an arrow function, though I'm not going to use that shorthand syntax. The next one on our list, though, is a good candidate for both. We have a function that just returns something. So what we can do is take this something, cut it out, remove the curly braces, and paste it right in. Right here, I paste it. Now we have to make sure to also use the arrow function syntax. So I remove the function keyword, and I add the arrow right in. There we go. Everything is working as expected using that syntax. Down below, we have for each. For each can be an arrow function, though it cannot use the shorthand syntax. And then our final one in this file, arrow function. Perfect. So let's go ahead and move through the other files. If you think you got this correct based off what you've seen so far, you don't have to watch the rest of the video. I'm going to be going through that exact same process. But I do want to use arrow functions where possible going forward, so I do want to swap them all out. Right here, we got another function. Down below, we got a few more. 1. Here is number 2. And down below, we got number 3. And that should be it for this file. This file is looking good. I'm going to save this one as well. Over here, we have just one more left. That's the notes edit file. We have a single function up above, find. This is a good candidate for the arrow function with the shorthand syntax. I'll switch it out for the arrow function first. That was a combination of switch and swap. And then we're going to take this, cut it, and paste it right here where we have the curly braces. Down below, we have a few more functions, and all of these functions, except for one, are for the event handlers. These can all be converted over to arrow functions. Got a couple more down below. 2 more for those. We have our storage listener. And then in here, we have one last one. This one is a good candidate for the shorthand syntax. So I'll remove that function keyword, toss the arrow in, grab the stuff we return, cut it out, and replace what we have in curly braces. Delete it, paste it, and we're done. So there we have it. The Notes app is now all wired up, and it is still working as expected. I can go over to the title page. I could enter some text. I could update the title, go back home, and all of my changes are still preserved. Everything is working really, really well. That's it for the Notes app. We can close down all of those files, and we'll switch over to the To Do app. We have just a couple of files in here. I don't need the HTML file. I just need To Do app and its functions file. Right here, we have a few good examples of just regular arrow functions. We got 3 in this one. Whoops, make sure to use the equal sign. 1. Right here is 2. Down below, we have 3. And then we just have one file left to analyze. That is the To Do functions file. Now, most of these are just going to be regular arrow functions. Right here, we got our first case. Down below, we got another one. This one does only have one line, but I'm not returning it, so I won't use that shorthand syntax. Here we have 2. The first one, just an arrow function. The second one will use the shorthand syntax. I'm going to take the thing I'm returning, cut it out, delete the curly braces and everything in between, and then just paste that content in. Now we just have a couple more and then we're all done with this challenge. A slightly tedious one, but an important one nonetheless. Right there we have our arrow function. Here we have a good candidate for the shorthand syntax. Down below, copy that stuff, cut it out, paste it between the curly braces. Down below that, we have just a couple of more functions. This one, regular arrow function. This one is an array method, but you'll notice that we have a lot of logic inside of there. So I am going to switch it over to an arrow function, but I can't cram all of this into the shorthand syntax, so I'm just going to leave it as it is. Down below though, we do just return something on this array method, so I can convert it over to an arrow function, and I can also use the shorthand syntax. I'll copy this stuff, cut it out, delete the curly braces and everything in between, and paste it in. Just a few more for this file right here, another function. We're going to switch it over to the arrow function. Same thing with down below. Down below that, we got a function for our event handlers. Both of these can be converted over to arrow functions using the verbose syntax. And then one last one, generate summary DOM. Remove the function keyword, add in the arrow. Take a deep breath because you are done. We have everything set up and converted, and all we want to do before we go is just test that it still works. Over here, I got my to-dos. I can still hide completed. I can toggle to-dos. I can still search. So all of the functionality has been preserved. All we have now is an arrow function instead of a regular function in all of those situations. So that is it for this video. We now know how to use arrow functions, and we will continue to use them throughout the rest of the course, not only in these projects, but in any other code we write. In the next video, we're going to move away from arrow functions and talk about a few other language features that are going to be really important when it comes to writing great JavaScript. I'm excited to get to it. Let's jump right in.